Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll give a couple of minutes to get everybody time to join what's going to be a fantastic and fast-moving webinar today. The true ROI of investing in your communication strategy, featuring Tom Ahern. So we're going to give a couple of more minutes for fun. While we're waiting, you can type in where you're joining from, what city you're at, what organization you're at, just so that we can get some feedback. Certainly you can just put that in the Q&A or in any of the, I think where you any place that you can share. And again, we'll give one more minute because Tom's got an amazing webinar today set up for you guys. So we want to make sure we have the best use of time and allow for some questions at the end. So Tom, if you don't mind flipping to the next slide. Awesome. Thank you. So just so that you all know from housekeeping, today's webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you. Typically, we send it about 24 to 48 hours after the webinar has been completed. So if you have to drop off for any reason, or you love what you've heard and you want to share it with colleagues, we will be sending out that recording. And if you want to ask questions, use the Zoom Q&A box. It's typically down at the bottom, and it's that Q&A. You can see where it's at. I see some people are already typing some stuff in there. Tom, if you don't mind, if you forward one more. So Givingdna and Pursuant are hosting this webinar with Tom Ahern. So just so that you guys know who we are, Givingdna is the world's first donor engagement platform, and it makes complex understanding of your donors' data very simple. It allows you to see the stories in your data, personalize outreach, and discover hidden opportunities at every giving level. And our sister company, Pursuant, is for organizations that have data, but they lack the expertise to leverage it. We have a digital and direct mail agency that has been around for over 20 years, helping and doing leadership within the nonprofit space. And without further ado, Tom, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Well, thank you, Don. And it's going to be rather rapid today because, as usual, I overstuffed the bag. And but there's a lot of things to say. Mostly, this show is a new show, and it came about because of DNA and Pursuant. And what we were talking about was something everybody notices in the nonprofit world versus the commercial world, which is what's often called a scarcity mindset, which basically just means people look at various things as costs rather than investments. And in the case of donor communications, often the idea is, well, we hate doing this because it costs us money, it doesn't really bring in any money. And that's absolutely not true. And we're going to look at examples. You know, I'm kind of a collector of examples, and I force my clients. Often they have no idea. How did it do? You write something, an appeal for them, and how did it do? Well, okay, I guess. No, we actually need data. So let's go forward. First, the issue of who are we speaking to, and the audience. All your return on investment, your success, is going to come backwards from your target audience. So when you know who you're talking to, you have a picture in your head, for instance. As a copywriter, I can tell you that's what you have. You know, I used to write to my mother-in-law because she was the right age. And these are typical American donors right now. And you can see the data is 2021 blackballed, so they're sitting on a mountain of data, good data. And actually, the average age being 65 is older than in 2020 when it was 64. So there's a reason for that. And the reason is not because younger donors aren't also very generous and willing to not just give money, but volunteer often and so forth and so on. But when you're younger, you're building your life. So you're spending a lot of your income. And until you get to about age 55, an average household, of course, you're probably not experiencing a surplus money, which is where charity comes from. It comes from our surplus. It comes from the money we do not need to live the lifestyle we want. And that starts to happen, data shows, around age 55. So even though you might think, well, we need younger donors, people who are 35 or something like that, we'll hold on to them all their life and so forth. None of that is true, by the way. You don't need 35-year-olds, and you will not hold on to most of them throughout their life. What you need are people who can afford to give you the most, and that would be donors 55 and older. Now, what else? So what are some other facts of life here in America right now? And the size of a gift below 1,000, if they're giving you 1,000 above, that's a different category altogether. But below 1,000, what Blackbaud found was that the average gift, or median actually in this case, gift was $20. Now, there's no reason to think, oh, that's so small. What that is a first date gift. And then it's up to you and your donor communications actually to see if you can get a second date and maybe then get married. The donor communications really only have two basic tasks. One is to acquire fresh donors, because there's always attrition to a list. Every year you're losing people, and to retain as many as possible of the donors who are still on your list. And that's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to do. The 8 out of 10 first-time donors do not make a second gift. Now, here's a nice kind of benchmark plan that was sent down from our neighbors to the north, Hillborn Charities up in Canada, and they, proposed can you double your fundraising revenue in a year, basically, and this is a true formula. This is not guesswork. You get 5% of your donors, the truest of your true believers, to put you in their wills, to put charity in their wills. The research shows that people are very happy to consider doing that. Then you move 10% of your donors to monthly giving, away from annual gifts, because that's a better kind of income stream, more predictable for the charity. And then persuade about 3% of your donors to upgrade. And if I'm giving you $250 and you come to me and I like you and you ask me to double that to 500, there's a very good chance I'll just say yes. All right. But so you've got these $20 gifts coming in, and is that fate? Is that all you're going to get? Well, no. Look at this is Heritage Foundation, 2008, very good at fundraising, and they're reporting that 60% of their 10,000 plus donors, and that plus could go all the way up to like $1 million a year, started out as just a regular direct mail donor. That person was responding to some kind of normal appeal. And that was 2008, but look, this is 2020 data. And again, it repeats the same thing. The Veritas group works only in the major gift category. Well, I guess in the median size too, but that's their featured focus is major gifts. And they're working with a lot of institutions. And they're saying most of these major donors, just the way the Heritage Foundation said, came in through an appeal, and they gave a little bit of money. They gave that first date gift. So today's topic is return on investment and what that means in the world of donor communications. And so I'm going to start with something that surprised the heck out of me anyway. I would say it's unusual success, and I think you'll agree when you see what the data shows. First of all it is a direct mail appeal, very basic one too, that was sent to everybody in this smaller town on coastal Connecticut, Madison. And you can see it's not even personalized. It's residential customer. It went into every mailbox in town. And you can also see right there in bigger type, the biggest type, right next to the picture. So your eye really can't miss it. She needs your help. exclamation point, underline. That underline and that exclamation point and the word you are doing most of the work. And so the donor, now that the word you has been introduced, the story is now about the donor. It's not about the organization. And we go inside. This is the actual letter, both pages. And one thing I want to point out, this letter was written by a volunteer and designed by a volunteer. So very low cost, no cost for the creative side. And so what do we have here? Well, we have a little bit of what looks like handwriting type, although that's actually computer type at the top. Will you help? And I blew it up so you could read it a little better. Will you help protect the precious shy whippoorwill from deadly pollution and habitat loss? Question mark, and a tear goes right down your right-hand cheek. And what they're setting up here is what's called a mental nod moment. It's a moment. This is where somebody either mentally agrees with you or doesn't. Now, the first moment is with the envelope, and that's one of your critical points for customer service, because you're trying to get as many people as possible to open that envelope, just as you would with a subject line in email. And the truth is, most people won't open it. The truth is, they're not saying no, by the way, they're just ignoring you. Most of the time, most of your non-response with good direct mail is because they're just ignoring you, right? And this was sent in December of 2021, so just a few months ago, well, 6 months ago now. So right at the top, the thing that is brought to my attention is that here's a local problem and we need you to solve it. That's the first most important thing in this letter. Many others. Here's what the reply device looks like. And at the top, if you've wondered, what do they call these things? They always has this yes thing at the top of a reply device. It's an affirmation statement. It's basically where the recipient's brain is going, yeah, okay, I like that. Or in here, I want to protect Madison's beautiful wild spaces for blah, 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 blah. For people goes first, by the way, because they have a lot of hiking trails in their wild spaces, and dogs are welcome. Okay, now we're going to switch gears just a tiny bit. This is something that came out of True Sense Marketing, which is also a major direct mail firm, and they published something they call the Fundraising Field Guide, which had all sorts of wonderful hints and tips in it. And one of them was this page saying, if you have local, explore local, exploit local. And my feeling is local actually can be a much bigger concept than just my own backyard physically. It can mean anything that is close to me, what is part of my identity. So if you hit my identity, as we know from the new research coming out of the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy over in the UK, then you're much more likely to get a yes vote from me. Now let's go back to the letter. So how many times, again, it's written by Maggie, and Andrea Hopkins designed it. Now I don't want to, get you too excited about the volunteer status. Both of these people are highly competent direct response artists, creative. They live in the town of Madison, so they just do this for that land trust. Andrea hikes every day, for instance, and so forth and so on. But I probably missed a couple, everything that somehow refers to the local scene, including the local scene as I hear it out my open window as spring comes along. So you can see it just keeps going back to it. Near my house, our summer nights, the sound of summer in Madison, et cetera, et cetera. And I can tell you, actually, the only thing they changed, this letter has been used for 5 years straight, and the only thing they change is the bird. Everything else is exactly the same. And the key words here, I just want to point them out because copywriting is one of the things we promised you. In that what's called a Johnson box, the big type at the top of the page, will you help protect? The word protect is very important. And then it talks about the bird from deadly pollution and habitat loss. And the word loss is very important because these are triggers for action. And then you go down in the middle of the page. This is where, everybody should steal this idea. People look before they read. And when they look, their eyes automatically go, because your brain is wired this way, to the bigger type. So when you've got a piece of big type in the middle, and it's framed in white space, it's a matter of survival. Survival is the word there that matters, and it is going to do most of the work of triggering a gift from a local person. How did they do? Well, in 2 weeks, in December 21, direct mail, not digital, they raised $100,000 from this small town in Connecticut. And if you did make a gift, then they would come back to you with a thank you card that is just perfectly suited for the refrigerator. And look at the personality that's in this card. So you've got the whippoorwill, he's been saved, or she's been saved. And you got another lovely animal, the barred owl. And that's from the land trust. And then you've got this thank you, which is not a conventional, silly, boring thank you from the board of directors. No, this is thank you from all living things, big and small, four-legged, no-legged, paddle-footed, bushy-tailed, feathered, flowered, winged, rooted, and finned, that depend on the land you help protect. You, this is the payoff, are the key to making the land trust a success! Exclamation point. Go buy yourself some extra exclamation points. They really are cool. All right, so what are we learning here, and where are we? I don't know. I'm just going to keep plowing on. We got Stephen Pidgeon's book. Now, Stephen started a direct mail firm in the UK on his kitchen table, or maybe it was his dining room table, I forget. But within about 15 years, it was the biggest direct mail fundraising firm in England. Then he sold it. Now he lives on an estate. And he took all his knowledge and threw it between these two covers, and that's what it looks like. That's his forehead. How to Love Your Donors to Death means you really should go shopping for bequests. But he also shares in this book a formula that they used at his firm for all of their fundraising. Now, this wasn't something that was slipped in a note under the door one day. It came out of years of testing, but this is the formula. You have your vision. Where do you want to go? You have the hero, that's the donor, and the charity that donor is supporting. You have the people served, the starving kids or the endangered whippoorwills. And then you have the enemy. And the enemy is doing most of your selling in acquisition mode. When you're trying to get new donors, you give them an enemy to fight. And I'll go back to the letter so you can see where that is. At the top in that Johnson box in the calligraphy type, will you help protect? So when you say protect, then that automatically triggers that instinct to, yeah, I want to protect in the enemy of pollution and habitat loss, both of which, as the letter points out, have become quite severe in that neck of the woods. And then you go down to the phrase I pointed out before, it's a matter of survival. Again, survival is the key word, and that's the enemy that my gift will defeat. Now, we do see a problem sometimes, and that's that charities kind of drift away from, nobody wants to talk about the bad things, et cetera, et cetera. But it's important to keep some need apparent in your donor communications, because if there are no problems to solve, then donors have nothing, literally nothing to do. And here's what happens. This is from an animal rescue charity in Upper New York. And big one, does great work, has its own police force that will arrest people that are for animal abuse and so forth and so on. But they didn't like bringing that in their donor newsletter to their donor base. Now, their donor base in 2008 was almost 22,000. In 8 years, because they brought no enemy to the door in their donor newsletter, it had slipped to about 15,500 annual donors. Now, that's a huge loss. And did they repair it? Yes, they did, because they overhauled their newsletter and started getting more need in there. You don't have to blanket it with, photos of abused animals or anything, but you want to have enough need in there so that your donors have something to do, so they don't think the problem's solved, right? This brings me to, well, what in the heck are donor communications? So let's take a look, because they're very simple, actually. You ask for my help. You then thank me for that help. And then you report back to me what happened with the money. And you can see this was put together by a group in Seattle, Better Fundraising. They came out of an amazing firm called, what were they called? I'll get back to it. Anyway, the Domain Group, see? And they created this graphic, but it kind of tells you what each step of this circle is. And what it reinforces, and what I wanted you to take away today, is that asking does not operate in isolation. Donor communications are a system. And the real money, the serious money, the lifetime value of a donor is going to be stimulated by your thanks and your reporting, not just your asking. And in fact, Jen Chang, psychologist Jen Chang, who was co-founder of that institute in the UK and studies giving behavior, says that your thank you is the most important thing that the most important communication you have. Now, here's my good friend, died too young of cancer, 53, John Hayden. And in his book, wonderful book, he talks about the sad, happy story cycle. And you can see you have a sad face with the ask, because you're asking a donor to solve a problem. It doesn't have to be a starving child, just a problem that the donor can help with. Then you thank them, and you make a big deal out of this, not some, trite, predictable thank you that I've seen a million times, but something just gushing, right? And that's your happy. And that you do go with the before and after. The before story is the ask, the after story is the thank you. And then your newsletter or your social posts, anything you're using to report, and it can be digital, it can be print, that has both happy and sad. But again, the ratio is probably 4 parts happy to 1 part sad. You're not trying to depress people. You're just trying to remind them that there's a need, and you need them for that need, to solve that need, to make that need go away. Now, the way I think about it, just because it's easy, is that each of these things, your thank yous, your newsletters, your social posts, are actually how the organization reaches out and hugs its supporters. And if that doesn't appeal to you, well, you really may want to rethink, because you'll make a lot more money. I mean, the payoff here is always about retention and revenue and lifetime value of a donor and so forth. So I think of this and I'll show you why in a moment, as this, you're giving your donors a big bath, a big appreciation bath. They're going to feel great. Hey, they're even going to smell great when they get out of this. And one thing, this is, my career is completely built on, oh, really? I never thought of that. A piece of advice from about 1,000 mentors, one of whom is Jeff Brooks, who's one of the great direct mail practitioners in the world. He's up in Seattle too, also came out of the Domain Group. And he writes in his book, this book you see on the screen, which is well worth owning if you can get your hands on it. I think it's out of print. Ugly works, tacky works, corny, embarrassing, and messy. They all work. And it doesn't matter whether it's print or digital. Now, why is it, when he says work, what does he mean? He means I don't have to translate corny. And that is faster. in communications than if I do have to think about it. So let's see where thank yous, for instance, get you. This came into me, and it was from Julie Capaldi. She's the ED, the executive director of United Way down in Pickens County, which is South Carolina, I believe. Not very affluent and so forth. Lots of problems for donors to solve. And one of them wrote back to Julie and said what you see on the screen. You know, you, Julie, you write the best thank you notes, and so forth. And what else was in the same envelope? Because it came in an envelope, $100,000 gift was slipped into that envelope. That's what a good thank you can get you. Now, let's take a look at donor newsletters, because often these are the things that I notice are the weakest element in the, that donor cycle where you're asked thank report. The reporting is not doing enough, is what I normally see. So we being a group of creatives I belong to, called the I don't know, my brain is working so slowly. The case writers, you can find us easily online, the case writers. And we created, since the pandemic started, 2 different donor newsletters just from the ground up. We in one case, there had been no donor newsletter. And in the other case, they were replacing a donor newsletter, which was already working, but they thought it could produce more revenue. Here's what happened. The people that were replaced their previous newsletter, they had a really big list. And of course, that's an advantage because, when people say no, it's a numbers game, that's what they're talking about. The bigger list is going to produce more revenue. They're getting almost $500,000 in extra revenue, extra giving from their donor base every time they mail this thing. And now, because one of the tasks was not just to kind of come up with a template for this newsletter, but also to help train the staff, the very talented staff and very committed staff. And so they're doing this in-house, and they're they're making a ton of money. The executive director here said, this is like having a printing press in your basement. Money floods in, and it also drives other kinds of offers like bequests and other kinds of planned giving. Now, here's for a smaller organization. This is in Sausalito, San Francisco Bay, and they've got about 25,000 people. And this one was created from scratch. They hadn't had one. They might have had a digital version, but this is a print newsletter. And it was built according to a formula. And the formula was a very well-tested formula. It was actually created back in the 90s. And when they send this out, as you can see, they're bringing in between $70,000 and $90,000 extra in giving every time it's mailed. And it's mailed quarterly. So that's like a $250,000 extra dollars a year from their newsletter, because people are part of a movement. They're part of a mission. And this reminds them of that mission. It reminds them too of how important they are to that mission. Now, giving is intimate. What the heck does that mean? Well, it means this. I learned this a long time ago, from a psychologist. And the person was basically saying, look, you pay attention to things that interest you. So let's say I get 2 magazines, one I didn't ask for, one I did ask for. The one I didn't ask for, that goes right into the recycling. The one I did ask for, I look at the table of contents. That's the difference between something that doesn't interest me and something that does interest me. And what interests me most is me, because each of us every day is rewriting or is writing an additional chapter to our life. And, so it isn't that we're self-absorbed, or maybe it is. I don't know. It's just the truth of it. And everything, as long as the story is about me, your fundraising story is about me, then I'm much more likely to pay attention to you. So one of the mantras right now, and many people will say this in fundraising: don't thank me for my gift. Thank me for who I am, my identity, my willingness to get off my butt and actually try to help somebody else. Here are the two phrases. They're both operational. You could say your donation counts, or you could say you count. And which one is better? Well, I would say it's the bigger, bolder, purplier you count, because it has emotional content to it that your donation counts does not. One is speaking to my wallet. One is speaking to who I am on my best days, by the way. That's, one of the realities of donor life or donor solicitation is that it's a relatively small number of people who might be inclined to think you're doing good work, who will actually take the time and act on your behalf and make some form of gift. Well, anyway, here's the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. The smiling person in the front, that's psychologist Jen Chang, and the gasping person just behind her in the cowboy hat is UK marketing professor Adrian Sargent. And they co-founded this institute. They're also married. They have two wonderful children, and that's all they do is they work around the world. Jen is very busy, has been very busy. The pandemic has screwed all of this up in China, working there in philanthropy, because it's a middle class. It's now becoming a middle class society. Philanthropy is becoming much bigger deal there, so forth. But what they found was that, and I translated this because it was originally in academic, which none of us could understand. When you like your donors, they'll like you back, and the way they show that they like you is with increased giving. And we, the three of us, I was kind of just the writer in residence with these two. We had an annual event in Scotland, again, pre-pandemic, where the promise was if you came, you would learn how to double your donations in 12 to 18 months. And people did, right? So I want to take you back in time to 2007-ish. And this was the day everything changed, because we finally had really concrete, hard proof of what a difference it made to talk in a different way to your donors. And as the subhead there says, headlines do matter. So you're looking at the front page, top of the page headline from a donor newsletter from Gillette Children's Hospital, which is in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And you're looking at what they had been sending out, and you're looking at what they started sending out. Now, these are adjacent issues. One, at Gillette, Medical Pioneer set the standards, that went out. And then the next issue that arrived was the one that says, Zawadi says thank you, and it shows Zawadi right there. Now, those are patients too. At the top there, the couple, but Zawadi is from Tanzania. And the headline on this article, which is about her excruciating surgery to have her feet, she was born with her feet pointed backwards, clubfoot, I believe it is its common name. And they got in touch with this specialist hospital. They do wonderful work there at Gillette, and asked if there was anything that could be done. They said, yeah, put her on a plane. We'll, we know what to do. And they did. They turned her feet around. So now she's, she can walk like everybody else. In fact, if you could see the full length photo of her, you'd see she's holding bags of her new shoes. She just been to the shoe store. Okay, so this is Wadi. She's saying thank you. You helped a Tanzanian girl stand tall on her own 2 feet, right? Kind of corny, right? Yay, because corny can't be misunderstood. Now, in the old version of their newsletter, the people who liked it most were the doctors or the staff or the parents of the doctors who would ask for extra copies to pass out in the neighborhood. The people that liked the Zawadi were the donors. And here's how much they liked Zawadi. In the old format, they would receive about $5,000 in gifts each time they mailed. And in the new format, and I really wanted to be in this office as this started to happen, the money kept coming in. It kept coming in, 10,000, 20,000, up to about $50,000 in gifts, just by changing the headlines, essentially, of the stories in this newsletter. And, this is 2007. So was it a phenomenon? Was it a one-off? No, I was back speaking in the Twin Cities just before the pandemic, kind of a theme going here. And Gillette was in the audience, and I said, well, so how's it going? He said, still going, still $50,000 just routinely is coming back in the mail every time we said, unless we slip and we go back to setting the standards for spine care and start talking about the great medicine. I mean, the medicine is in there. It's just not in the headlines. The donor is in the headlines. I'm going to bring you to another thing that we really need to talk about, the faster test, vitamin F. And I'm going to lean on my favorite guru of all time, Seth Godin, who's a marketing guy, and very, very, very compassionate, intelligent. And he has a daily free blog that is, just better than fortune cookies. And one of the things he said at one point is that our target markets are often, quote, lazy people in a hurry. That was his quote, lazy people in a hurry. He did not mean that we should condemn them. What he meant was, you have to deal with this. This is real life now. And one of the things that's real life now is that we have a shattered attention span. Now, there's been some dispute about this particular research, who has which species has the longer attention span, the goldfish or the adult human. And it was measured in 2003, it was measured again in 2013. And it turned out, well, at least it was reported that the goldfish was now #1 over the average adult human. Whether that's true or not, it is true-ish and true enough. And one of the reasons that happened is because social media finally hit the the big leagues in around 2007 with Facebook. And also you had the iPhone being introduced. And that was the first super duper popular, smartphone. And so the book there, Ben Parr's Captivology, it's really a helpful book to have on your shelves. How do we capture people's attention? Well, he'll give you a lot of examples. Dan Hill reported in his book, Emotionomics, and Dan is a well-known neurology-based advisor to, political campaigns and so forth. He's reporting that we now know from neuroscience that the average the person can have a gut reaction quite quickly. They can lean towards you, or they can just lean into the indifferent mode within 3 seconds or less. So you want to be really fast at your communications. You get talking quickly, talking in big type, short paragraphs that don't require me to expend mental labor and are surrounded by white space. This is a very successful letter. And I'll just point out 2 things. One is it starts with a question, and a question in direct mail is called an involvement device because it tends to make the brain become a little bit more alert. And when you put it in quotes, it obviously is somebody speaking. Well, who's speaking? Well, that's your very own Mississippi River talking. In fact, it's the Mississippi pleading for your help. And then it goes on. And all we're trying to do is get people to join the Friends of the Mississippi River. All right, so what happened? Well, membership jumped 20% with that one letter. And I've labeled some of the things that are happening here in this letter. But the thing you see on the right, 40% offer, that is the estimation of experts of what really is doing the work in an appeal. 40% of what's doing the work, or 40% of the work, 40% of your result is going to be to the clarity of your offer, the simplicity of your offer. Give me a simple problem to understand, give me a simple problem to solve, and make it affordable, and then add in a sprinkle of urgency, and you've basically got a good offer. Another 40% comes from you sending it to the right people. So if I sent this to people that couldn't care less about the Mississippi River being a healthy asset, you're not going to get any response. But it wasn't sent to those kinds of people. It was sent to people that already belong to things like the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, et cetera, et cetera. And there's what's the other 20% of your response? It's due to the miraculous creativity, which doesn't have to be anything better than corny. All right, this is Scotland teaching a master class. Last one was in 2020. That's Loch Ness out there in the distance. And Dr. Sargent, Adrian, all of a sudden, I'm taking copious notes because this is gold, shouts out, "Gotcha!" It made you feel something. We were all asked to read a letter and see when our heart started to respond, not our brain, our heart. And that whole thing about making me feel something, that is core to success in donor communications. Make me feel something. And here are the various ways, they're in purple, that you might do that. You know, you thank me beyond my expectations. You make me proud of what I did. You tell me loud and clear, I am so needed. And this is all, again, based on neuroscience. It goes back up to our neighbors to the north, Canada, Donald B. Colney. And Colney was made this statement: the essential difference, blah, 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 between emotion and reason is that one leads to thinking and one leads to action. And action is what you want. I don't care if people really read my stuff. What I need them to do is respond to it, because that's what, you know, first of all, that's what the client is hiring me to do, is see if I can improve response. But in my feeling, inertia is your biggest problem in fundraising. Getting people to actually do something is really, really hard. So we're going to end here with a one last example. This is a small community foundation. Well, I shouldn't say small anymore. Relatively recent, though, a community foundation down in Virginia called the Hampton Roads Community Foundation. And in the year 2010-ish, they merged with another community foundation and the board decided to invest money in bequest marketing, because that's where most of their, you know, in their principal for the permanent endowment was coming from. And so in that year, they put 50,000 in. And then within 10 years, as you can see, they realized $78 million in legacy gifts. The whole thing was based on an offer of a booklet. Now, the booklet for legacy giving can't be what focus groups call a death brochure. It has to be a life brochure, because obviously. So anyway, and so this is the cover: adding charity to your will, or IRA, and a quick guide to the pleasure and promise of charitable bequests. And this is the 4th edition, I think, in 10 years. They just keep updating the photography. The text internally doesn't change. And there's the note that, you know, I got an email from the client telling me what had happened. So, you know, what did they spend that original 50,000 on? Well, we basically spent it on advertising, and we advertised any place we could think of to see what worked. And to, you know, here's a spoiler alert, what worked finally best were sponsorship ads on the local NPR channel, right? So we're back to Mr. Pigeon. And he's saying in his book, all but the biggest major gifts are chicken feed compared to legacies. And, you know, you might think, yeah, but that's tomorrow dollars. Are we actually ever going to see, you know, I'm going to put time into this and I'll be long gone by the time these gifts come back. No, we have good research. Again, this is from the UK, which is where they study the charitable bequest market quite heavily, and very data driven. What they found was that within 3 years, you're starting to get bequest gifts being realized from wills. And that is not, it may sound unlikely, but it's because of how people update their wills, which they often do when they're very late in what is considered their terminal lifespan. So, let's not forget, donors are coming to the rescue. Negative emotions are linked to survival. Therefore, they are much stronger, as this neuroscientist points out. And so what makes donors give? Well, this was a list prepared by Next After, and they gave me permission to share with you. And I put the voice balloons on just so you can see what people are thinking. And these are 6 great reasons why people might give. And I believe we're there at the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tom. Oh my gosh, you had such great stuff in there, and I can't believe you got through it all. we're going to make sure that we send out this deck as well, because if you are like me in the audience, I am sure you want to go back and reflect and maybe look at some of that content that Tom showed you and where he was bullet pointing, and copy it, take some advice from it. We did have a few questions that came in. We're kind of a little bit long on time. So what I'm going to say is the questions that came in, thank you guys so much. We will get Tom to answer these questions for you. And then we'll get you out an email with the answers to those questions. And Tom, there's about 6 of them, so I'm not going to put you to work too much on that. I just want to be conscious of people's time as well as yours. Okay. And if you don't mind, if you forward to the next 2 slides, I just want to finish up with a couple of housekeeping things. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about Givingdna or Pursuant, you can click on take a picture of our QR code, and it will take you to where you can schedule some time to have a conversation with our team. And then next one, Tom, if you are not already on Tom's email list, I would strongly suggest, and I'm sure after the webinar today, you're going to want to subscribe to his e-newsletter so that you can start hearing some more great stuff from him as well. So Tom, thank you so much. We had a great time, great information. I think it's so important to tie back to the ROI that you have to kind of spend money to get money, right? And so, those suggestions around where you might be able to optimize that, I think are fantastic.
Good. Okay, so we're going to ask and answer questions.
If people want to stay on, I'm happy to ask some questions, answer some questions. So if you need to jump, that's fine. But let's go ahead. And I mean, we have till the top of the hour. So if you are interested in hearing some of these questions and answers, feel free to stay on. The first one comes from Heather Gleason, and she says, "Is there any data on how many people actually open appeal letters?"
Well, a direct mail appeal letter, probably no, because you'd have to actually, I guess, follow the postman around and see what happens next. You will judge, I mean, there are metrics, of course. You will judge things by your response rate. So response rate to what is called an acquisition mailing, which is trying to get new people to make a first gift. That in industry standards, if you're getting a 1% response, you're doing well, which sounds ridiculous. You're sending out 100 appeals and you're getting 1 gift back. I mean, that would sound disappointing, but in fact, it isn't. Those are how your numbers actually have to work. I did for one of my clients was bemoaning it. They were, oh God, it's so terrible. I said, no, actually, you're getting a 1.5% response. That means you're beating the industry standards. That's a huge success. You should go out to a bar after work. But when you get into repeat donors, so this is what's called your warm list, the people that are responsive and continue to give to you, that list can produced a 10% response, sometimes a 20% response, but you kind of accumulate response over the year. If you only mail once, you're going to get that response. But if you even mail the very same appeal twice within, let's say, 4 weeks, you're going to accumulate additional response because they didn't say no, they just ignored you.
Right. That's awesome. Another person was curious about the 2-page long appeal that went out, that kind of they've been taught that might be a little bit too long, and that they're supposed to be as succinct as possible. So can you kind of comment on that?
Yeah, that is an urban myth, and I've tried it on occasion to track down where this urban myth came from. That the shortest, briefest one-page letter possible is somehow going to out pull. That's just using jargon. A two-page letter or a four-page letter for that matter, because the surprise, if you ask the 20 top direct mail firms in the world, as I have, what works better for acquisition, for instance, that's trying to get that first gift, a one-page, two-page, four-page letter, they all say almost all the time, the four-page letter works better.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And
there you
so
go.
I don't have a good answer for you. It's wrong, basically, the idea that it's a one-page letter, maybe for business correspondence or something, but not for fundraising.
And maybe if you're even worried about it, maybe you just A/B test it once, right? So
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
can do that.
it's the same postage for either one, right? So
Yeah,
and see which
exactly.
one works better. And maybe some orgs it might not, but from what you're saying, most orgs it is. So Hallie, I think hopefully I'm pronouncing her name right, was asking, can you suggest an enemy to fight for in the performing arts organizations?
Yes, I can. And arts organization often bring this up. In fact, it's kind of one of the primary questions from arts organizations. We don't have starving children. How do we raise money? Well, the enemy can be anything. And what the enemy would be for an arts lover is a lack of arts. So, I mean, you got to think about the target audience. Why would they give to you in the first place? Well, because they love the arts. It's, just kind of generalized. And you're providing that, and I'm guessing you're really, really good at it, and I really want to come and see what you've got to offer. And now you're telling me it could go away? No, 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 no. Bad enemy, must defeat, must defeat.
That's awesome. Great, great. Okay. Dana says, can these lessons be translated for university fundraising, which is typically a lot less local once the alums move away?
Well, it's not geographically, it's not as local necessarily, although a lot of times I've learned from some schools, maybe not the biggest universities with brand names and stuff, but that the alums don't go that far. They're like within a 300-mile radius. However, let's put that aside. What is local. You need the broader definition of local to understand what you're really dealing with alumni. And that broader definition is they have an experience, they've had a life experience that has changed their life, and it is connected to your school. Now, yeah, like me, maybe they spent their 4 undergraduate years basically sleeping off hangovers, but they had their feet on the ground. They, met people there. Their lives were changed. Their income, the storyline changed. And if it was a terrible experience and they got nothing out of it, no, you're not going to get a gift from them. But what you want to look at in alumni giving is the percentage of alumni that respond to an appeal. Now, an average across the United States, and I work with universities, an average across the United States is something like 6, 9, 10% of the alumni give to the annual appeal. That's an average. So if you're getting less than that, then that's not good. If you're getting more than that, then you're doing better than the average. A university that actually works this, as Princeton does, Princeton has something like a 60% annual giving rate from alumni. Now, how did they do that? That's my secret, and I can share it with you sometime. We don't have time today, but they work it, and they've been working it since the 1930s. Harvard has in the mid 40s. Other Ivy League schools are in the 30s. Good state universities, if they're really ambitious and have a great reputation, they might be in the 20s to 30s, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. I figured that was kind of what your answer was going to be. Okay. I have two that are kind of around the same thing, and they're around newsletters. And the first one was, Should the newsletter be more for stewardship, or should you be asking for a gift and sending a remit envelope within there? And then the second one is, do you have a general template for a newsletter, and should it be advertising ways to give, or giving programs, or donor-centric stories and stats? I think they're both kind of along the ratio of, should we be asking or should we be just stewarding in our newsletters?
Yeah, the typical answer to that from people would be, it's a soft ask. It's not a hard ask. It's not an appeal. But often I see people drifting, particularly if they have a cover letter from like the executive director that is on top of the newsletter inside the envelope. That cover letter tends to sometimes drift into appeal talk. You just want to feel needed. And yes, so I mean, the suggestion that's more about stewardship is right. But do also include that reply device, because that's just customer convenience. If, for instance, they read something in there that kind of stirs them in some way, then you want to give them an easy way to send a check if that's what they're going to do. Remember, these are older people on average, or go online for that matter. I mean, feature the whatever your your URL is for your website and so forth.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, this is an interesting one. You have a direct mail piece that was successful. Should you use that same one again in the following year to the same audience, or should you change the content?
This is where charities need to at least have a little bit of marketing training. See, in marketing, you're trying to save money. So when you find something that works, you use it until it doesn't work anymore. And with direct mail, it could work for 10 years before you had to change it. In the nonprofit world, because they don't have that realization of how marketing actually functions, they tend to think, well, people are bored and we need to change it up, so we should freshen it up. And the truth is, no. First of all, they don't remember it. Secondly, not that many people actually responded to it in the first place. Thirdly, well, you had the example of the successful for the Madison Land Trust. They sent the same letter out for 5. They're still sending the same letter out. They'll send it out again next year. 5 years, all they did was change the bird. Everything else about it is basically the same. So no, do not fall for that. We got to, they're bored, they'll remember it, and we've got to make it different. That is absolutely not untrue.
Yeah, absolutely. And you run such a risk of sending out something that isn't as well received, right? I mean,
if it worked, yeah, do it again.
Yeah. Do it again and again. I absolutely agree. Okay, let's see. I think I've got time for maybe one more.
Okay.
Okay, so Tom asks, can the characteristics of a good direct mail letter be adapted to email?
Absolutely.
And if so, how?
Yes. Well, the if so, how, that's a very long, but thank you for that suggestion, Tom, because that may be a new webinar we need to do, which is, how do you take the principles of physical direct mail appeals and apply them to digital? And basically, it's the same thing, although the environment is different. A physical direct mail piece, if it gets open, which is of course your first barrier, if it gets open, it's a more, it's a textural, it involves different senses than the digital world. The digital world is very action oriented, and people, once they get it, or they're moved, I felt something, they're ready to go, and you give them something to click on. There's a fabulous book that's in its second edition called Don't Make Me Think. And it is about how to simplify everything you do in digital world so that I don't have to think. I really don't have to think at all. I just have to click. And so maybe that's the big difference. you know, you're going to see, you're going to track things like your opening subject line opening rate, your click-through rates for the offers you make inside that digital appeal. And you'll learn a lot from that. And if you're, you know, basically you're going to baby step your way to improve performance. You know, you'll stop sending, let's say, the same subject line out for every newsletter you send out, which is, you know, this is your April newsletter. Yeah. So, I mean, it's boring is what it is. It's your boring April newsletter, because, you know, the March newsletter didn't do anything for me, and the February newsletter. So you want to have your subject lines be much more teaser oriented, for instance. So I have to open it.
Yeah, I agree with you on teaser, on being a little provocative sometimes, and a bit you know, non-traditional. Actually gets opens, and we've seen that happen over and over again as well. So, well, we're at the top of the hour, Tom. We went long. Thanks everybody for hanging in there. We had a ton of people that hung on for the questions and answers. We did not get to all of them. We'll try to get to the rest of them. We will be sending you out the recording of this as well as the deck. And Tom, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your expertise.
Oh, Don and Leah, this has been a great experience. And all of you who showed up, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.